you guys for coming. This is the first food festival that we're back from COVID. I'm really excited that everybody's here. A beautiful New York day. And we're here to talk about something that's essential to New York and to the rest of the country, which are restaurants and the future of restaurants. You know, COVID really changed the game for restaurants. It devastated some of them. It brought on an incredible amount of innovation, and it made us all realize how important restaurants are to our community. But even before that, restaurants were undergoing a lot of transformation. Workers and customers were demanding more equity in restaurants, both financially and culturally. So we are really at an inflection point with the American restaurant. And here to help us unpack all of that, Rashida Holmes, in from LA. I know. That's for both Rashida and LA, I know. So Rashida's a chef de cuisine, a formerly trained chef who was working in Los Angeles, and in 2019 started a small Caribbean roti business out of her kitchen. And it immediately became a hit within her community and soon became like a national cult favorite, including a favorite from Tejal Rao, one of our columnists. She loves you so much and says hello. And now looking to open a brick and mortar, right?
At some point, yes.
Okay.
We'll see.
Kwame Onwuachi, who, I know.
Thank you.
Opened your first restaurant, well, from the Bronx, and opened your first restaurant in DC in 2016, James Beard Award winner, and now is working on opening a restaurant. In fact, just came over from a restaurant here in the Lincoln Center area. Tatiana?
Yes. I'm back in New York City. I'm so happy to be here.
Named after your sister.
Yes.
Yeah. Also wrote an impeccable memoir, Notes from a Young Black Chef, that is going to be a major motion picture soon?
Yes. It's turned into a film.
Who's going to play you?
We're still working on that.
Okay.
Maybe I'll play myself.
You should. Then because those residuals from the SAG that's good. Yeah. And our last panelist, Danny Meyer, you might know him from such hits as Union Square Cafe, Gramercy Tavern, and a little hot dog stand he started across from 11 Madison Park called Shake Shack. Danny, I probably has done more than anyone I know to steward and change the standards of American hospitality and define what it means to be a great restaurateur in this country. He's still advising many young chefs, investing, and helping run his own beautiful constellation of restaurants. So Danny Meyer. So we're going to get into the future of the American restaurant, but first I want to start with a little benchmark and ask each of you, like, what's your idea of a great restaurant? What do you look for? What makes you feel good in a restaurant? Rashida, let's start with you.
What's my idea of a great restaurant? I think it's a place where, for me personally, I taste something that I've never had before, and that also makes me feel like home as well. Couple that with a really, really nice proprietor and a really, really nice glass of wine, and you can make something great. Also, the price point is right.
The price point. We're going to get into price and restaurants because that's certainly a thing. Danny, what about you?
I'm with Rashida. My favorite restaurant is the one that kind of blurs the lines between did I go out or did I come home? You know, if you think about it, when you go to a restaurant, you don't have to do the shopping or the chopping or the dishes, but you also get this environment. And the environment is the key. I think James Beard said it really well when people would always stop him because he was so recognizable. And they'd say, what's your favorite restaurant? And same answer every time. He'd said, my favorite restaurant is the same as yours. It's the one that loves me the most.
The one that loves me the most. Fantastic. Kwame.
Yeah, so, a great restaurant to me has a great vibe. It's not only a place that I just go to eat. It's a place that I go to celebrate. It's a place that I go to meet people. It's a place that makes me feel welcome. In one of my restaurants, I made it so that every server said, or every service staff said, or any kitchen staff, if you walked in, have you been here before? No, well, welcome home. And if I feel welcomed in a place, it can be a small taco shop on the side of the road in Guadalajara, or it could be, you know, Gramercy Tavern. It's all the same to me of just feeling like I'm not missing anything.
Right. I think that for restaurants right now, we are at a place where, and Danny, you and I have talked about this a lot, we're redefining what American hospitality is in a way, right? It's certainly should be much more inclusive. We have, I think, a bigger economic divergence in restaurant culture than we ever have. And we all are redefining how to be nice to each other again, right? From the pandemic. I mean, we talk about, we just came out of an era where it became okay to slap a flight attendant. Like, how did that happen, right? So all of this is part of American hospitality. Right now, where we have incredible costs, tough time hiring, people have expectations. Is American hospitality in trouble? And what do you think is the new hospitality? You're in the middle of creating American hospitality. What's your take?
I wouldn't say it's in trouble. I think Americans are social beings. Like, look at all of us here. Can we give ourselves a round of applause? Like, we got up and gathered today to be together. And I think people strive for that. I think on the business side of American hospitality, I think the restaurant industry has always been in trouble. I don't think this is a new windy road for us. It's been tumultuous from the start. And I think we have to figure out how to be better business owners at this rate. How can we bring the community into the restaurant? Restaurants are the cornerstone of the community, but I think many times we've pushed out the communities that have so graciously brought us in. And that community doesn't just mean outside of the restaurant, but it's within. So I think it's about taking care of the house, whether it's inside or out. But it's a troubled route regardless. The restaurant industry is a hard business to crack. So, you know, we just got to keep on down the road.
What do you think, Danny? You've cracked it a few times.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is about it. When you ask what is American hospitality, it makes me think about what's hospitality elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the first time I was fortunate enough to go to France. And I was a little kid. And someone at the table next to me snapped their fingers and said, "Garçon." So we had a complete hierarchy where the guest was here and the staff member was down here. That just would never happen, I hope, today in America. I think Americans in their hospitality want to be served by someone who's happy to serve them, who's not subservient. You can be a server and provide service without being subservient. And I think that that's something that we pretty much have figured out how to do in this country. That said, we've been challenged. I don't disagree with Kwame that we've had challenges forever, but I think we've been especially challenged in this post-COVID time because as much as people do want to get out and be with people, and I've just never seen so much pent-up desire to do that, you see what's happening on airlines where people are punching out the flight attendants. We've seen that in our restaurants too. We haven't been punched so far, but
Speak for yourself.
It's testing. There's a very small number of people who are so emotionally bent out of shape after 2.5 years of not living their lives as they used to live them, that they've forgotten how to behave, and it puts American hospitality in a spot where you can't be nice to everybody all the time. You got to draw lines, and so we're as pro-staff as we can possibly be, and we think that the happier our staff is to come to work, the happier that most of our guests will be as a result.
Right. And you had you sort of that idea of enlightened hospitality that you wrote about is that, right, where the main thing is that coworkers are treating each other well and management treating the workers well, and that will translate to a great guest experience, right?
I think you have a much better chance of having a happy guest if the servers and cooks are happy coming to work. Because if you put that in the inverse, you might get lucky and have a good experience, but if you have a really unhappy cook cooking your meal, somewhere along the way you're going to taste it.
Right. And you also have this other note about charitable assumptions, right? In the hospitality business, like, don't assume that that person is an asshole. I'm not supposed to say it up here, but right.
Hey, it's your employer, not ours.
That's right. Okay, come at me, Arthur. I'm ready. But yeah, so you don't assume that they're a jerk, right? Assume that maybe they just got a divorce, their kids busting their chops, or having a bad day, right? The charitable assumption.
Yeah, and so I believe me, it's when I talk about a challenge right now, because we do bring a charitable assumption to every guest interaction, every staff interaction. The challenge in having a pretty equal playing field between staff and guests is that everybody's got to bring their best. Everybody, both people have to bring their best. And I don't assume anyone comes to a restaurant to have a bad time.
Right.
And I don't assume any of our staff members intend for anyone to have a bad time. So we're starting in a good spot,
Right.
but things go wrong. And if we make a mistake, maybe the food is 10 minutes later than it should have been. And as you just said, Kim, the person at the table just had a horrible day for whatever reason. It can be a trigger to something that is now our responsibility to quell, because we want to make sure people leave happier than however they came in.
Rashida, it's interesting. One notable thing about your pop-up and what I've heard is that you have somehow created a real sense of caring, even though you're giving someone food to eat either around or wherever, the seat of their car, next to your thing. But one thing that Tejo mentioned is just every little thing that you put in the food, the knife cuts and the touches on the food just gives love, and that in that you're creating that sense of caring. And I think in a pop-up, how do you, is that a conscious thing? And how do you create that sense of community and love in what is a very to-go sort of experience?
Well, it's in the food itself. It's in the care. You know, even though we're kind of putting roti together and wrapping it up and putting it in a bag and giving it to you in your car, you know, the small interaction that we have can be one that's great, and the care that we put into packaging the food, it matters. Like every little step matters. And I think, you know, I just want to comment on something that Danny said about the kind of labor reckoning that we're having in the restaurant industry. I think it started before the pandemic, really. It was really, you know, I would say kind of out of Me Too, there was this thing where we don't want to work in places that we come out with PTSD, and we all have a little PTSD probably from people we've worked with from the past, and that's not the experience we want as I've grown to be an owner and a manager. That's not the experience I wanted my staff to have with me. So I like the fact that putting it on an equal playing field of that customer and guests and extending hospitality to your staff. I think that's really like American hospitality really is we've always given it to the guests and we haven't always given it to staff, and I think extending it across both places is the major change I've seen in the last 5 years.
And is that really, like how widespread is that? Do you think that the last dying gasp of the French Brigade, bro culture, baguette as penis in the kitchen era, is that, do you think we're really gone with that? Or is it just the beginning of a movement?
I'd say we're somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I don't think it's completely gone. I know people who still work in those environments, and if that's how you want to run a kitchen, fine. But I think it's teetering off. I work with a lot of young people who don't want to work in restaurants because of the things that they've heard. They just want to float around and do pop-ups here, do events here, and that does make it difficult to kind of staff, permanently or place because of the reputation that this business has had over the years. So it's definitely petering away because I think the next generation of cooks is not going to tolerate it, and I think that's a good thing.
Right. Now, Kwame, you've worked in some of those kitchens, per se, like some tough kitchens where that was the standard, which you wrote about some. How are you in your kitchen and with your staff, how are you gonna change that paradigm?
I think it's just treating people like as simple as it is people. Making sure that you're understanding that there's a life outside of these four walls that we create for them. And I think when when you can try to resonate with them as human beings, you inherently hold yourself accountable. It's like you're not going to sit there and always yell at your friends. You know, if your friend makes a mistake, you're not going to bash them, and they're not going to be your friend that long. And I'm not saying that like every single person is my friend and we're going to go out all the time, but you should just be treating people like how you would want to be treated. And when, you know, maybe some things come out from back in the day that I'm regurgitating, I think it's about catching yourself in the moment and knowing that we're also not perfect. Working in a restaurant, I try to equate it to like a day job. You know, most people get an assignment. It's like, here's what I want you to do. Give it back to me in about a week. We get that every 6 minutes, you know, that comes out the ticket machine. So sometimes, you know, there are feelings that come about. Sometimes there are tempers that flare. But when you can realize that you did something wrong and talk to somebody like a human being, I think there's just a better understanding and just a better working relationship in general.
Right, because I think people want we've come to expect a certain standard in restaurants, right? And I know a lot of us who eat at restaurants a lot have felt like there was giving everybody the pandemic asterisk, right? Well, like they just came out of the pandemic. Staffing is hard. Things are expensive. But I think there's a sense like now, if you're going to open a restaurant, the time of excuses is over, right? I feel like, you know, and it's expensive as hell to eat at restaurants now. So, I mean, are we at that point where we can start to expect, as diners giving our money, expect a higher standard again?
Higher standard of what?
Higher standard of quality of food, service, value.
I'd like to address that. I think that
It's not personal, Danny.
No, not at all. I don't take it at all personally. Let me just get back to your earlier question. I think that Me Too was almost exactly 5 years ago when we first read about it, Harvey Weinstein and all that. But it had been going on for decades. 2.5 years ago, roughly, when George Floyd was murdered, that was a different kind of reckoning, not only for society, but certainly for our industry as well. And I think that as hard as it is sometimes to look in the mirror as an industry or as our restaurants, it's the best thing that could have happened because there is no going back. And, you know, for years, chefs very, very proudly would tell you about how much they cared about the way their vegetables were raised or how their animals were brought up. But we weren't talking about how we cared about people. We talked about plants and meat, livestock, but not people. And in the same way that you shouldn't be proud that you're not serving asparagus in February. You're just out of step if you're doing that.
Right.
Well, you shouldn't be proud if you're treating human beings with dignity.
Yeah.
You should just do that. And whether we like it or not, and I kind of do like it, I like that restaurants have been held to a higher standard. Restaurants are squarely in the middle of the entire social dialogue of this country. And getting back to your first question, I'm not sure that's happening in other countries with their restaurants. I think they go to restaurants and they expect to have a nice meal and
Hot now, you know?
Yeah, but I think when you go to a restaurant in America today, there's certainly many, many restaurants, fine dining restaurants, and fast casual restaurants. You expect that restaurant to stand for something starting with the food. If the food's no good, all bets are off. If the atmosphere doesn't make you feel good, all bets are off. If the staff doesn't make you feel like you belong and you're welcome, all bets are off. But now let's say that 80% of the restaurants you go to can do all those things. Now what you really want is a restaurant whose values align with what you believe is right. And if you start to hear that people are being mistreated in the kitchen, in the dining room, by anyone who works there, the chef, the owner, the general manager, any manager, you should never go back.
Right. And I think that is a new generation of diners who are demanding that as one of the standards, right? that, you know, I want to go to a place where people are treated well, right? And I think that the kids, the new generation of diners are really shaking up how we experience restaurants. And Rashida, this is interesting to me. You started a pop-up, a cottage kitchen industry. A lot of people are making their living doing that now. You can get amazing food if you have a good Instagram feed, right? And you're willing to go for it.
Yeah.
That's a whole new way of dining, right?
Yeah.
And it's also, like every great idea, gotten co-opted. The pop-up, which was a very community cottage, really, you know, now we have Rene Redzepi doing $700 pop-ups in keto. Like, that is, I don't know, that disparity, like the good ideas that now are getting co-opted. So talk to me, two things. One is the economics. I feel like we're really, more than ever, you know, your auctions for really expensive tickets to eat at expensive restaurants, a whole new thing, and a small community, underground community of really great food at pop-ups. Are those going to come together? Where do we stand at that? And are pop-ups the future of how we're going to eat? That's a lot. You can
that was
do
a
it
lot.
in 2 minutes. I'll give you 10 minutes.
I'll break it down a little bit. To the last thing you said, I don't know. I think that there is a future for pop-ups to be sustainable in this space, but it's difficult. It's harder than not having a home base to be in, kind of running your kitchen kind of all over town. I think it's more an entry point rather than a sustainable business. I think what pop-ups at least allowed me to do was to put my food out there when I didn't have enough of a reputation for someone to give me a bunch of money to open a restaurant, so I kind of did it myself with the limited resources that I had. And luckily we have the internet, we have social media that I can, like, that's really my storefront. I don't have a storefront, Instagram's my storefront. So it allowed an entry point for someone like me to put something Caribbean food in LA, which is not really well known, not like here in New York, out into the ether and see what I got back. And I got a tremendous response, and that was really cool. I've been doing it for 2 years now. It's working. I mean, I'm here on this New York Times stage, so I guess it's working okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danny. But at the same time, you know, I want to grow from this point, you know. Now there are eyes on me, and now, you know, there's expectations of what's going to be next. So it's a very different thing than someone like Rene Redzepi doing a $700 pop-up, because he has the name and the recognition to kind of be in that space, and he's going to sell out, and that's going to make money. Whereas, you know, my friend down the street who wants to open up her Thai concept, she's got to build it from the ground up, and that's a lot harder. So the two things I think are completely different.
I see.
I don't think that they exist in the same space. Do I think they're the future? I don't know. At some point, you got to have a kitchen to cook in.
Yeah. Right.
in a spot. So, but I do love the fact that it opens up opportunity for people who didn't get opportunities before. Right. So that's the thing about pop-ups that I think can be sustainable in the future.
And it's almost in an instant, diners became like, yeah, I'll eat that way. Like before it was, you know, but it was like, wow.
Well, the pandemic made a huge, I mean, I don't know if it would have worked without the pandemic.
Right.
I honestly don't, because
right.
particularly in LA, like, traffic's terrible, and you're gonna like drive all the way to my house just to get a meal that you can't sit down and eat, and you're gonna eat in your car. But there was no traffic, so people were like, yeah, sure, I'll come to your house on a Friday at 4 o'clock, no problem. So I don't know without the pandemic it would have worked. Mm-hmm. I also don't have a sample size to go off of, so who knows? Right. But the explosion of pop-ups in LA since the pandemic, since everything's opening up, because people have become, the guest is now open to be like, oh, I'll go to someone's house and watch them cook over open fire and not really worry about what's in the fridge and what's not in the fridge, and just like take the risk and go for the ride. So
I'm actually curious, how many people here use Instagram and that kind of like underground pop-up method to eat? How many people are in that world? Okay. And how many people are pissed off they can't get reservations at higher end places? See? Okay, there you go. You're going to figure out how to make these two work. So you are entering into traditional, I guess, restaurant culture, right? Tell us a little bit about your vision for your restaurant and why you've decided, I mean, this is high stakes game, you know, no pressure, but, you know, Lincoln Center, New York City, named chef.
Yeah, I really wanted to wait to come back to open a restaurant. I had 5 restaurants before the pandemic in Washington, D.C., and I don't know, I like to hug my guests. So during the pandemic, I was like, I'm gonna take a step back until I can service people the way that I like to service them. So when I thought about like what I wanted to do, there was a lot of offers on the table. New York City, I grew up here, and I thought it made sense for me to open up a restaurant here right after the pandemic. So it's right in Lincoln Center. It's called Tatiana. It's named after my sister. It's all food I used to beg her for as a kid growing up in New York City with the Afro-Caribbean undertone.
Tell us about a couple dishes, just so we get a vibe for it, or a couple things that you're working on that you're excited about.
Yeah, so we have agusi soup dumplings with like a red stew base. We have truffle chopped cheese buns.
Nice.
Peking mushrooms with scallion massemin bread.
Hell yeah.
Pollo guisado. So
Nice.
like a lot of different things pulling from different cultures in New York.
Great.
Yeah.
And you're right in the hot seat of trying to talk about service a little bit. You're in the hot seat of trying to hire people right now. And Danny, your restaurants, I think service hiring people has been a game. You were talking to Kwame about he's in the spot of hiring, giving him some advice about hiring. Right now it's difficult to find staff, right? And is it true for you as well, Danny, in your places?
It has been incredibly difficult, but I will say it's actually become a little less difficult for sort of a counterintuitive reason, and that is that as inflation has made food prices go through the roof, that means that if you're a tipped employee, you're making more money than you've ever made in a restaurant. In our restaurants, we actually have a revenue share for our cooks as well.
Okay.
So they're making more money. And so that has actually brought, even though it's been incredibly tough for people to keep up with the cost of inflation in their real lives, it has brought more people back to work, and they're actually doing better than any governmental minimum wage hike has done since I've been in business. Inflation has done in our industry.
Right.
So it's an interesting time. We'll see where it goes. But what we were talking about earlier, restaurants are kind of like lambs. They have a season to be born.
Mm-hmm.
And if you miss it, it gets a little more challenging staff-wise. So for example, I'm rooting for Kwame to get his restaurant open in the next month.
In the next month, yes.
Because
Are we all rooting for that?
Yeah.
we're all rooting for that.
And if you want a job, just stand here and you'll.
Yeah, because I'm taking applications
They'll
right
be
now.
doing interviews after the
And
panel.
because if it gets into December, that's almost impossible to hire people in December, because if you have a good job, you're not going to leave your restaurant in December to come, even though it's Kwame, you're not going to leave in
that's
December.
because that's when the big bucks are made and restaurants' busiest season, and you're not going to take a risk on a new place and have your income drop.
And by the
right?
way, Kwame is not going to probably want to hire someone who would leave their restaurant in the lurch going
Yeah.
into the busy. Would you?
No,
Thank you.
I'm not going to take them from you at all, I promise you.
All right. Let's talk about tipping for just a second. I don't know that America will ever give up its tipping habit. I think there's something really inherent in classism and all kind of other things. And it's just so, but Danny, you gave it the good college try to eliminate tipping and fold in that service charge so that it could be shared across kitchen in front of the house. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you lost a lot of good employees in front of the house because they can make more money elsewhere. Was that what happened while you stopped doing that?
Well, we did the experiment for almost 6 years,
It's a long
and
experiment.
we reversed it during COVID, primarily because when New York was first able to serve outdoors, which was late June of 2020, the few people who had come back to work, remember this was before there were vaccinations, were putting themselves on the line. And our guests were like throwing dollars at them to say thank you, because we had been in our apartments
Right.
pent up for all that time.
Right.
And it just felt completely antithetical to taking care of our staff to say you're not allowed to accept someone's gratitude. And in fact, you have to tell someone you may not say thank you to me with a tip. So we reinstituted it at that point. And I'm glad we did, because it just, as you said, Kim, Americans are loath to give up their tipping. And in order to do all the things we wanted to do, family leave, paying our managers more,
Healthcare.
health, well, we've always had healthcare, but even better healthcare, life insurance, retirement plan, all the things we wanted to do, and bake it into the price of your chicken.
Yeah.
Our menus were starting to look pretty skewed compared to everybody else's menu prices, and we couldn't ever charge quite enough to do all the things we wanted to do. And something had to give, and we did give it a good shot, and I'm glad we did, because philosophically, I'm proud of why we did it, because every year for the last 20 years, the tipped employees kept making more and more money, and the cooks who are not eligible in New York to accept tips were pretty stagnant. And drawing that gap year after year just felt horrible.
Right.
So that's why when we did reinstate it, we instated this revenue share for our cooks, so that on a busy night, instead of the waiters high-fiving each other and the cooks just perspiring more, the cooks can now share in some of that as well.
Kwame, what's your model going to be?
My model is going to be tipping for sure, but we're making sure that every employee has health insurance and benefits and things that I really didn't have coming up as a cook. My motto is to take care of the house and the house will take care of you. And I think that should be the mantra for everyone in whatever business that you're in.
Rashida, are you? What's your view on a tipping culture and taking care of employees?
I mean, taking care of employees is number one. We don't have any front of house staff. Everyone cooks on our staff. Even the person who brings you the food is a cook as well. So if you tip, it goes to everyone, which I like. And even if we do grow to a brick and mortar, I want to keep it that way. We kind of have a model of cross training this whole staff. So your cashier will work a dish shift, your dishie will work a cook shift, your prep cook will work a cashier shift, and that way, as we can pay people equitably across, and we can give people raises based on their work ethic and not based on their position.
I see.
So that's
it's
the dream.
Merit
That's the
raises.
dream.
Like work hard, make more money.
Work hard, make more money, and
Right.
I think people appreciate that, and I think that it's a dream, and we do it right now, which is great. But my staff is 4 people, so it's a little bit easier to do it right now. As we grow, I hope it's something that we can continue to do.
Just a little practical break in our panel. Tipping, how do you tip? Do you always give the same 20%? Do you vary it based on your service?
Oh, you're
Do
gonna
you
call
do
me
the
out on my
indignant
personal tipping code?
10%?
All
Okay.
right. No, it's fine. I'll answer. I'm just saying.
$5. What is it?
Like when you go out, what kind of tipper are you? And what's your advice to people to tip at a restaurant?
I mean, I do.
I'm asking this of all of you.
Okay, good. I mean, I do 20% unless something or more, depending on the situation. I try to go eat for places I know the chefs, so I can get a free little dish here
They're
and
gonna
there,
take
and
care of
then
you, right.
it feels better to tip a little more because I got a little discount. So
Okay, I like that. I like that. And I'm always curious
say-
because
I'm being
sometimes I
honest.
want to go. I'm only going to leave 10%, and that will send. And they don't understand it's a message. They just think that person was a jerk who just tipped me 10%. I don't feel like that ever works
No,
as a
no
message.
judgment.
But
No
diners perceive that it does. Danny, what do you tip when you have to be a good tipper? Because if it gets out that Danny Meyer's a shitty tipper, bad news. Career's over.
He doesn't believe in tipping, so he doesn't tip
That's
at all.
right. I don't tip.
0. Let's change the narrative.
I philosophically will not tip you. Yeah.
Kwame, it sounds like it's your turn since it's already been asked. No, I think restaurant people are in general good tippers because we know that the tip is part of your income.
Yeah.
And I don't think we punish with a bad tip. If anything, we over tip because we understand what the life is like. And
Yes.
And there's karma involved too, believe me.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I don't really check the percentage. I over tip every place I go. It's
Because
at
you're in the
least 20,
business.
25%
Yeah.
at the very least. And that's for like an okay experience.
Right.
Because
Right.
you never know what someone is going through that day. It may not just affect that individual, service member. It may go to the kitchen. So like it has nothing to do just with punishing them. That's not the answer. So I usually tip at least 25%.
Okay.
So.
I also think that because almost every time you go out today, you're going to get something from some reservation platform that invites you to share what your experience was like.
That's the time.
That is a healthy way to express how you think things might have been better, but you're not punishing your server anyway with a tip. Most houses are pooling all their tips.
Yeah.
And so it's a very ineffective way to provide feedback.
All right. Do you think people really read those, like, how was your experience? I just start to not even do it anymore. Although occasionally if I have a bad experience, I might,
I
But
think
do
so.
you-
As long as there's Yelp around and people are still looking at Yelp, then
Yelp.
people are going to fill out those
There's
surveys.
700 Yelp critics right in front of us.
How many here have wrote a review on Yelp before? Raise your hand.
Don't be shy, admit
So
it.
yes,
Okay.
people still fill out these things.
That's right. I felt the donut was not fresh enough. Yeah, so, okay. And just one other, while we're still on the practical side for our, I want people to get their money worth of this thing. What's a way to be a good customer and get good service at a restaurant? Like, are there things that if you were advising somebody on how to go out to a restaurant, what are the biggest mistakes a person can be to not have a good experience, and what are the secret tips to get a good experience? I always feel like there's some code I don't know, right?
Don't be an asshole,
Don't be an asshole.
honestly.
Yeah.
Do you all need some
Really,
pencil to
don't be
write
an
this?
asshole. There's no blueprint to like a good life or anything,
Okay.
But like I would say, treating people how you want to be treated, it's not going to guarantee you're going to get a free appetizer or something, but your day is not going to be ruined if you're just nice to people,
Okay.
especially people that are taking care of you.
Right, Danny, same thing. Any thoughts?
I couldn't agree more with what Kwame said. I wouldn't have said it, but he said it, and he's right. I think that nice gets nice, and that's always been the case. And I think that
Nice gets nice.
Uber has Uber and Lyft and those ride sharing have a pretty good thing where you get rated as well as you giving the rating. Restaurants don't do that, and I'm guessing they probably won't do that. But why not act as if it is your responsibility to act in the way you want to be treated as well?
Yeah.
Rashida, you want to add any of that?
I don't know how you add to that.
Okay.
Be nice.
Is there a
We
way
learned
to?
it in kindergarten. to be
Is there
nice.
a way to? Again, we will get back to the content. I'm curious here. Is there a way to successfully complain about something and an experience you're having?
Absolutely.
Like get the manager is not the first move, right? What's the best way?
I mean, you can get the manager. I'll take it from an experience that I've had when something hasn't been right. I will, hopefully by the time your food comes along, you have some sort of rapport with the person that's been talking to you for 20 minutes as a human being, right? If something is wrong with the dish, you can simply say, hey, this is undercooked. I just wanted to let you know for your own betterment. I'm not looking for anything free. You can either ask for a refire of that dish, or you may not want it anymore. And I think that's the best way to go about it. But when you do pout and when you throw your hands up in the air because someone made a mistake, I think that's when things go awry.
Right, but it's legit just to say, just so you know, this didn't
Yeah,
work.
I don't think there's a problem in
Oh,
that.
we want you to do that.
Yeah.
We'd much rather fix something. We want you to leave happy, just like you do. So if something's not going right, say it. Say it directly. No one meant to do something to you.
Yeah.
They actually want you to be happy. What's really bad is if we don't learn about it till we read about it,
Yeah, on Yelp, yeah.
on Twitter or Yelp or whatever.
Exactly.
Right, and Rashida, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, just let us know. We want to know, how do we get better if we don't know that we made a mistake? So the sooner we know, the sooner we can fix it. And that can be harder, particularly my model, because it's all to go, so you don't know until you get home. But that's fine. Send me a DM. We'll take care of you.
Okay.
Should know the roadie.
And we have a few minutes left, but I'd love to know really how you see the future of American restaurants. Where are we headed, and what would your ideal be? How can we set the bar for how we want to be as an American restaurant culture? Just maybe some final thoughts from each of you about that.
I would say, I think the biggest takeaway is I don't think it's going to get any cheaper. So make peace with that.
Okay, y'all got that? This is a safe space. We can feel...
Make peace with that, because
all right.
We want to be able to pay people well. We want to be able to provide people with benefits. And we want to change the labor model in our restaurants. And in order to do that, we have to charge more for food. I mean, that's where the money comes in, to pay all the people to get it done. So I think if collectively as a culture we can get comfortable with the fact that if you're not going to eat at home, which is going to be cheaper, you're going to go out, it's going to cost a little bit more, but hopefully that the value will be there.
Those are all the restaurant owners over there. Yeah.
Hopefully we can match the price with the value. That's my goal.
And ultimately, the way to match that value is by how you feel treated. I think that people perceive value in how much love they got from us. They really do. That's what people come in for. They want to belong. I have a hope. I think that, as Rashida said, there were some good things that came out of the pandemic. The fact that people got used to, curbside pickup and going to her house for food and taking food home in a bag meant that we started to understand that we can eat good food almost anywhere in almost any kind of setting. What I would love to see, however, is that we say this is a celebration that you can eat well from a truck, from a cart, from a stand, but you can also continue to eat well in the kind of restaurant that Kwame is about to open. And the amount of love that goes into creating these environments. I would just be really sad if New York or this country became only off-Broadway and off-Broadway, and we lost our appetite for on-Broadway.
Yeah.
Because we can do good stuff there too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's true. I
Yeah.
think that's true. There's something to be said for that beautiful high-end art of fine dining. All right, so what's your vision?
I think the future of restaurant industry has a huge role in saving our planet. I think reducentarianism and reducing our meat intake is going to become a very prominent factor in how we eat as human beings. I think we consume way too much meat. I mean, I just ate from Cote and Picking House, so I'm not, saying, I'm with you all here. We, as all of us, we need to band together because, this planet's not going to be here for long if we don't treat it nicely. And I think our animal consumption is a direct result of how we see our future. And I think the restaurant industry plays a huge role in that, myself included. So,
Great. Well, listen, thank you all. This panel, all stars. Really appreciate your time, and thank you all for coming to the food festival. I hope you go and have a great day. Thank you guys. You're amazing.